Wonderful. Thanks, Sean, and thanks to the team at Nisos. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces with the other presenters. A great contribution from the community at large, and we're happy to provide our contribution as well. As Sean mentioned, my name's Sasha Angus. I'm one of the co-founders of Hyas. I run our Intel services. And if you haven't heard of us, please visit our website. You're not alone. I think we literally hired our first marketing person about a month ago. And so we're happy to provide more information on who we are and what we're all about. As a broad overview, we help provide infrastructure and adversary attribution intelligence. We have access to a host of global infrastructure that adversaries love to use, allows our clients, who are typically sort of global corporations, to be able to tag and track adversaries in real time and use the data that we have to be able to predictively detect and block malicious infrastructure before it's used. The presentation today, I wanted to go through some interesting data sets and some interesting combinations of different types of data that allow you to do not only the infrastructure attribution, but get down to literally the physical doorstep of an adversary when you need to. We do this in collaboration. One of the companies is SpyCloud. Paul, you heard from Malbeacon this morning, so I hope everybody knows about them. Fantastic organizations, and encourage you to check them out as well. So I wanted to begin from a sort of a typical investigation. And a lot of the traditional indicators will focus on infrastructure attribution. You look at things like IP addresses, domains, perhaps email addresses or telephone numbers, those sorts of things. On the right-hand side, you can see that there's a hash of a piece of malware that we want to investigate. We can pivot very quickly to understand the nature of the domain that's acting as a C2 infrastructure. From there, obviously, it's helpful if you understand what other pieces of malware also looked up that domain. And so that sort of initial sort of investigation where you get to from traditional indicators allows you to get records for the domains and obviously associated hashes for further research. What we tend to find helpful, and where you can start blowing things out a bit, is really looking at some of the other indicators. Emails are obviously helpful, so you can take a look at what other domains have been registered by the same adversary. In this case, he's running a bunch of bots off of his various domain infrastructure. What we've also found very helpful from a pivot standpoint, and it's one that we've seen shared by both advanced adversary groups as well as nation states and others, is to take a look at the telephone information and to understand the nature of not only the email addresses that are associated with it, but the telephone numbers. And from there, the other email addresses are likely and often associated with them as well. So one of the data sets that we find very helpful is what's called HLR data. That's home location register data. It allows you to understand the nature of the telephone number that you're looking at. In this case, there's a mobile number that used to be on Sprint. It's now on T-Mobile. And if you look down to the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, you can see that it's actually physically on the network, and there's an actual device connected to it. And what makes this helpful is that we've tended to notice over the years that when there's an actual physical device on the other side of a telephone number, the rate of recidivism and use of that as a nexus of malicious activity tends to go up by a factor. And again, it's not just script kiddies and other folks that can't afford new phones. For whatever reason, adversaries love to continue to reuse that type of infrastructure across organizations like TO505 that's been mentioned before, a host of nation states as well. And so it's a helpful pivot. And when you see that there's an actual physical device connected to it, becomes very useful. In part, one of the theories is that with the ICANN regulations and RAA data that's required of folks when they register their accounts, you either receive a text message and or an email that you need to click the link on. And so obviously adversaries don't want to have to reuse or sort of burn infrastructure every single time that they're registering new domain infrastructure. So they tend to reuse it over long periods of time, which is a helpful correlation and something that we keep an eye out when we're looking at that sort of stuff in real time. So what we've also found, and there's been mention of it in previous presentations, is the Nexus, obviously for adversaries to use credential stuffing and password reuse. While there's lots of really innocent people that get breached all the time, there's also lots of really bad people that get breached all the time. And so it's an opportunity to be able to take a look at publicly facing IOCs, marry those with breach records, and get a whole host of additional information returned that allows you to understand the nature of the relationship between an email address and a telephone number, understand that the same password were used in a host of other email addresses, The data points typically unearth a lot of non-public information, including handles that adversaries love to reuse in various forums, whether carding forums or other criminal forums, and allows you very quickly to understand not only what's publicly facing, but a whole host of indicators and additional IOCs to investigate. In this case, this particular actor loves using 3 different passwords that were plain text passwords in general. So they become very helpful pivot points to ask the system what additional email addresses have ever used those passwords, and then garner additional information from that to really blow out the understanding of who your adversary is and what's related to them. So it's not just your average run-of-the-mill adversary that is guilty of this. Quite frankly, some of the most sophisticated actor groups that we've seen have these TTPs and have these OPSEC failures on a regular basis. This, just in case you're wondering, is the chief of security for the Saudi Crown Prince. Those are all of his email addresses tied together. One of the helpful data points in breach records is an actor's propensity to daisy chain them together, so that one email address is the recovery email for another email address. And as you can see, that this actor does that in spades. So again, get a full understanding of all the digital infrastructure that's related to an actor. And then you can crash it against other data sets like the types that we have to be able to take the digital infrastructure and physically locate it down to an actual location. In this case, that's the penthouse condo that he lives in Saudi Arabia. And so again, very helpful from a taking sort of publicly available information and being able to build out investigations and getting a full understanding of the nature of the footprint of a particular actor. Again, if you're still not convinced, this is one of the malware developers for Muddy Water. He has a cascading OPSEC failure. And so again, it allows you to pinpoint a whole host of additional IOCs to go pivot off of, passwords, handles that they've used, as well as campaign infrastructure that we've seen associated with Muddy Water. And so when you go from there, it's very easy to get down to who the actor is, what's related to them. You can see that he's very partial to a host of different hacking monikers, Gladiator Cracker, Stuxnet of all, Gladiator as well, and Shadow Cracker. When you combine that with some of the data sets that we have at our disposal, it takes essentially the campaign infrastructure that Muddy Water uses and allows you to understand the nature of the adversaries behind it. In this case, there was an IP address that was used in campaigns by Muddy Water back in the middle of last year. We were able to take those IP addresses and geolocate them down to a park in Radisson in Baku, Azerbaijan. When we looked at several other sources of open source intelligence, we were able to see that this actor was actually physically in Baku, about 3 blocks away, taking pictures and posting them on Flickr. So again, when you look at an adversary, as you go back in time, where their OPSEC is not as sophisticated, it allows you to go back and correlate all their previous infrastructure with new infrastructure and then sit on and monitor new campaigns as they spin them up pretty much in real time. Getting back to our initial target, again, when you can pivot through the publicly available information, look at breach records and other data points to be able to understand what else is associated with them, it becomes easy to be able to take a look at things like online services like Skype and other handles that have reused a lot of that information. And from there, you can pivot to other open source intelligence to look at social media profiles, a whole host of other data points that allow you to take, again, a piece of malware, understand what's related to it so that you can block it. And if the actor is persistent, if it's someone that's taken a particular interest in your company or your vertical, you can continue to monitor them, and where appropriate, you can engage with law enforcement to be able to effect arrest and to ideally take the actor off the field. This handle right here, the TFBJDKIY, that's just an internal acronym that we have at Highest, which is when we work with actors and work with clients to understand the nature of their adversaries. There's a saying we have, which is totally F, but just doesn't know it yet. And so again, combining a lot of these data sets put together allows you to do exactly that. So one of the things that always frustrated us, and it was born out of some research that we did and investigative we did work around back in about 2013 with the Mariposa botnet. So the team at Highest was the team that found the Mariposa botnet and worked with the working group to help take it down. We're always frustrated by the granularity of geolocation. And so we've developed a solution that's helpful for us and that seems to be decent as far as its efficacy goes, where we can not rely on what we would consider to be generic geolocation or sort of less granular geolocation, and be able to go from what is essentially most of the time sort of 25 to 50 square kilometers, taking it down to about 2 to 5 square meters. And so a lot of the services, they rely on data from RIPE and ARIN and APNIC, as well as other registries to understand what is being said an IP is located at. And you see this with VPN services all the time, that a VPN exit node may be in the city of London, but you know that the actor is not obviously operating from there. There are other avenues, and there's again proprietary stuff that we've developed that allows us to take an IP address and literally go down to the actor's doorstep. So in this case, this is where the guy is, and again, from an adversary infrastructure perspective, it's helpful to understand the nature of an adversary, whether or not they're a lone wolf, and like this actor was, or more advanced persistent groups and financially motivated groups that continue to spin up a whole host of infrastructure and create dossiers on them for the ones that are persistent against your organization. So I know Paul from Malbeacon had spoke this morning, so I'm not going to get into a lot of what the background is for Malbeacon data. Needless to say, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to understand the nature of the actor that's using a piece of malware, what infrastructure is related to them, and then to be able to understand what additional families or additional campaigns may be running by that same actor. Again, the technology is and something that Paul's developed, and I know others use as well. Is incredibly helpful to understand the nature of the infrastructure, as well as the IP address and things that are associated with it. We take it a bit one step further. We're able to map together again through the cookies and through other domain infrastructure that we have visibility into, not only the clustering of a particular campaign, but a clustering of all the families that they use. In this case, this one is a campaign that has strong ties to Silver Terrier, as well as multiple malware families. And when we bring it all together, it looks like this. And so LokiBot, this was an actor based out of the UAE that was pretty proliferant as far as his use of a host of different malware families, using DNS data as well as breach data and the data that comes from folks like Malbeacon. You're able to spiderweb out all of their campaign infrastructure. It allows you then to sit on them and understand when they spin up new domains, when they spin up new campaign infrastructure, so that you can proactively block it and understand the nature of an adversary as their campaigns and as their infrastructure continues to evolve. From there, we crash it against, again, the IP data that we've got that we developed over the last 5 or 6 years. Allows us to go literally from an IP address that was used as part of the C2 infrastructure for the adversary's cPanels or other malicious activity, take it down to their BSS ID, and then understand literally down to the doorstep where the actor is, what else is related to them, so that we can continue to monitor and where appropriate, our clients and us can engage with law enforcement to be able to take this actor off the field. So we're seeing a lot of this type of activity. I know a number of the speakers have talked about the types of COVID-related activity in the last 2 weeks in particular. We're very happy to be a part of a number of the working groups and volunteering the data that we've got to help fight the scourge. There's a British actor that unfortunately has taken a lot of steps to try and create phishing kits around COVID and phish a number of government organizations as well as other victims. So we're looking very much forward to having the British authorities basically knock on his door and take him off the field. So again, it's a typical use of a combination of both traditional traditional IOCs, as well as some additional data sets that we find very helpful that allows us to do this, allows our clients to be able to do it. And for a number of the researchers that we work with on a daily basis, we provide this sort of access and these sorts of partnerships as well. So again, some steps where we can take what would otherwise be pretty obscure binaries and understand the nature of the adversaries and the infrastructure that they use. So appreciate everybody's time and attention. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to hop on the Q&A session and take it from there.